Chucky Hepburn leads Louisville past number 14 Indiana in Atlantis, giving Pat Kelsey his first signature win as the Cardinals head coach.
You are Locked On Louisville, your daily podcast on the Louisville Cardinals. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Card Nation, what's going on, everyone? Welcome into this very late Wednesday evening edition of the Locked On Louisville podcast. I'm your host, Dalton Pence. This is my fifth year covering the University of Louisville, third year hosting this show. And I want to take the time to personally thank you all for making us your first listen of the day. Just a reminder, Locked On Louisville, free and available on all streaming services 5 days a week, your team every day. Now, guys, today's episode of the show brought to you by FanDuel. New customers can place a $5 bet, and you'll get started with $150 in bonus bets if you win your first $5 bet. All you have to do, visit FanDuel.com to get started. The Louisville Cardinals made a statement in the opening round of the Battle for Atlantis tournament, defeating number 14 Indiana 89-61. Chucky Hepburn was incredible in this game. The victory gave Pat Kelsey his first signature win as the head coach of the Cardinals. We'll break down the incredible team performance while also previewing the semifinal matchup against old Big East rival West Virginia. So Thanksgiving Day will be a notable one for the Louisville Cardinals. This is as good of a performance as you could have hoped for in the opening round of this tournament. I went into this matchup. I even mentioned it. I didn't feel like the Cardinals matched up well with Indiana because of the size and the front court and the potential of the backcourt. You know, Omar Ballo, Mackenzie Mbako, two really good players. Louisville was, starting to get closer and closer to basically being a pick'em. According to FanDuel, the official sportsbook partner of the NFL and title sponsor of this show, they went off at like a 0.5 or 1/2 point underdog. But this win was a culmination of really good camaraderie and chemistry on both ends of the court, and we'll break it down on the next segment. But for starters, Pat Kelsey picking up his first signature win as the head coach of the Cardinals. Coming into this tournament, I said that it was going to be a major test. Like, we were going to learn a lot about this team. When you lose by 22 to Tennessee at home, a game in which you never had the lead, not even for a second, it's going to spark some concern. Amongst the fan base, the discussion was whether or not we spoke too soon on this team, and were we a little bit too optimistic on this season. Pat Kelsey was adamant after that game you're not going to be able to recognize this team. This team is completely different. This is going to be a good team. And you won the next two games against mid-major opposition, so you have an opportunity to show yourselves and to prove that, hey, look, not only do we belong in the conversation with these teams, but we can beat these teams. And beat the team they did. 28-point victory over Indiana. They had a 7-point lead at halftime, and then the second half, everything was going right for Louisville. Like, they came out with a surge of energy, and, well, actually, they were probably pretty energetic from the very beginning, and that didn't stop over the next 40 minutes. At one point in the second half, Louisville had a 38-point lead over the Hoosiers. Now, some garbage time scoring cut the lead to 28, but still a blowout victory and a statement made. Look, I've seen it all over social media. Indiana's overrated. Louisville's not that good. Indiana just sucked today. Mike Woodson's about to get fired. I mean, it goes on. The doses of copium that I'm seeing on social media it's quite alarming, but it's not unexpected. Louisville really hasn't been getting any credit from the national scene outside of, the media. I mean, from the rest of the landscape, it's more so, Indiana lost this game versus Louisville won it. And we're going to debunk that coming up on the next segment. But there's two ways that I look at this. I will admit, there's a chance that Indiana went into this game overrated. And that's going to happen early season. I mean, rankings aren't always an indication of how good a team is early on in the season. We're seeing ranked teams get blown out. We're seeing upsets this week alone on Feast Week, and it's been a great week for college hoops. Indiana might have been a little bit overrated. Do I think that they're a top 25 team? Yes, I do. Is Mike Woodson on the hot seat? Probably so. I think that one of the only reasons why he got this year, maybe because he was an alum, but also because he put together a really good recruiting class. You went to the portal and you got Omar Ballo, and you got some other players, and you had some guys returning. So the hope was that he was going to be able to take the next step forward. They have one tournament win in 3 years with him as head coach. And it looks like that seat is going to get hotter and hotter, especially since they have another tough matchup against Gonzaga on Thanksgiving Day. So coming back to the first point, I think two things are true at one time. Number one is that Indiana probably was a little bit overrated. Is Indiana the number 14 team in the country? It's weird because if Indiana would have won this game, the narrative would have been, yeah, this Indiana team is really good. But because Louisville played so well, people can't help but look at the final score and by default say Indiana's overrated. It's a little bit of column A, column B. We just discussed column A. Column B is that Louisville put a game plan in place and executed it to damn near perfection. They played really well on both ends of the court. And it's the benefits that when we talked about this team before the season, it sparked me to predict a 21-10 record. So we saw that on display against Indiana. So for the Louisville fans listening to this, don't let people take away the significance of this victory. This is the first time that Louisville has defeated a ranked team in 3 seasons? 2021, is that the last time that Louisville defeated a ranked team? I think it was Virginia Tech. I mean, it's one of those things to where I don't think people can discredit Louisville fans feeling this way because they don't really understand how down we were these past 2 years and how apathetic fans got and how depressing things were, to where you're not going to take any of this joy away. You can say whatever you want about Indiana. This is a good win for Louisville. This was a needed win. This was the first of hopefully many signature wins of the season for Pat Kelsey. So, like I said, two things true at one time. Indiana might have been a little overrated, but a lot of credit is deserved to be given to Louisville because they played really well on both ends of the court. I feel like Pat Kelsey made adjustments in game. You could tell going into second half, they completely got Indiana rattled, and Louisville was just able to continue, or they're able to continue to hit them in the mouth over and over and over, and Indiana just did not have an answer. So like I said, for those fans, because there will be fans that come on to this show of other teams, because why wouldn't they? Because, I mean, I guess Kentucky doesn't play this week, or Miami doesn't play this week, or, whoever the generational haters are of this show. They'll come on to this show and say, well, Indiana sucks. Point proven. 8 minutes into the show. Oh, well. But I will say, kind of moving forward, is that this isn't the end-all, be-all of the season. As good as this victory is, as much as Louisville fans had been yearning for this result, regardless of who it came from, just beating a top 25 team and, being relevant once again, you now have to turn around and prove that it wasn't a fluke. Okay, Indiana's bad. That's fine. Watch us compete against teams down the road. Watch us compete against Ole Miss. Watch us compete against Duke and Kentucky and North Carolina and West Virginia and whoever you're playing on the schedule. So it becomes equally important that you don't get caught up in that. And I'm not saying or suggesting that Louisville is going to. The only thing that I'm saying is that it's a long season. And yes, this victory is really nice and it's refreshing. If you go on a skid after this, you take away a lot of significance of that victory. So that's something that you have to just be able to use this as momentum. It was nice to also see Louisville do this on national television, on ESPN. The Battle for Atlantis, in my opinion, is the second most popular Thanksgiving week tournament outside of the Maui Invitational. I think it's the Maui Invitational number 1, and then right under that at number 2 is the Battle for Atlantis. Louisville was the game that tipped it off. And Louisville, Indiana is sort of like that pseudo rivalry without really being a rivalry. It's kind of weird, but you can tell that those programs and fan bases just don't like each other. And so this game just meant a little bit more than if they were playing like, I don't know, like Texas A&M and them being ranked 14th. I'm just picking a random team for emphasis, but to be able to get that win in blowout fashion like they did in a prestigious Thanksgiving week tournament on national television, it's great because you're starting to change the perception of the team. But 89-61, the final score, and it really wasn't even that close at the end. But how did they get there? Well, it starts and ends with Wisconsin transfer point guard Chucky Hepburn, who was absolutely phenomenal, basically had a career day against the Hoosiers. We'll break down his performance when we come back on today's episode of Locked On Louisville. Cardinal fans, I mentioned during this segment that FanDuel had a line on the Louisville game to where Louisville, it was basically a pick 'em between Louisville and Indiana, and fans were like, well, how accurate is that? Well, obviously FanDuel knew something that we didn't, and I constantly find myself in that line of thinking. FanDuel is America's #1 sports book, and if you're a new customer, you can bet $5 and get $150 in bonus bets if you win. The app gives you everything you need to place live bets on the NFL all in one place. So when you get a hunch in the middle of the game, you can check out the latest stats, view live play-by-play, and so much more on the same page where you place your bets. Just visit FanDuel.com to join today. You'll get started with $150 in bonus bets if you win your first $5 bet. That's on FanDuel.com. Never waste a hunch and make every moment more with FanDuel, an official sportsbook partner of the NFL. It's been a while since I've seen that dominant on both ends of the floor performance from a Louisville point guard. Like, I remember last year, Tyler Johnson having a really good performance on offense. Chucky Hepburn on Wednesday afternoon was nothing short of remarkable. And he had a pretty good stat line. He tied a team high in points with Noah Waterman. Chucky Hepburn was 7 of 10 from the field, 2 of 4 from the three-point line, 16 points in this game. He had 10 assists and 7 steals. Those 10 assists and 7 steals were both career highs for the senior from Omaha, Nebraska. And he was a menace from the opening tip-off up until the final buzzer. And it wasn't just the box score. Like, you look at that stat line, and that's a very good stat line. It doesn't even begin to closely represent how good he was. Offensively, I mean, you're talking about a point guard that, minus Corin Johnson, Louisville had to have a guy that was going to lead this offense. And Chucky Hepburn was the prime example of exactly why you spend big in the portal for a elite veteran guard. Because in my opinion, having a great front court is nice. The key to having a team that can go deep in March is when you have elite backcourt play. And getting Chucky Hepburn, a guy who started over 100 games in the Big Ten, it was put on full display. I mean, he didn't get sped up nor slowed down. This is an Indiana team that had been really good defensively coming into the game. He operated the pick and roll with perfection, finding open cutters to the basket, finding open shooters, and then being able to create his own shot. He almost put Omar Ballo on a poster. He looked like he got rim stuffed a little bit, but nonetheless, Indiana played pretty physical on the defensive end, and the referees allowed it to happen. And Chucky Hepburn said, okay, that's fine. I'm going to rise to the occasion and play really well. He was really good offensively. And defensively, I mean, he was a menace. 7 steals in this game. Louisville had 15 total steals. Chucky Hepburn had almost half of them. That's how good he was from, just being able to jump the passing lane. When an Indiana guy got the ball around the high post, Hepburn coming over from his help defense stance and being able to swipe at the ball and causing a turnover. Just the active hands, the understanding of what's going to happen, seeing the play unfold before it even does. I mean, Hepburn coming into this season, we knew he was going to be, in my opinion, he was the best defender on this team. And it looks like he made a pretty solid case early on to be like, hey, look, I'm him. Hepburn was fantastic. And if he's playing at that level or somewhat close to that level, Louisville's going to be able to take that next step. And it's really going to bode well when Corin Johnson comes back. And that's going to form a really, really nice backcourt. But overall, it was nice to see. I think that Noah Waterman, Kason Pryor, and Terrence Edwards Jr., all three, it took a while for them to get going. And Javon Hadley as well. Like the other four starters, it took a little while to get going. Like Rain Smith was really good in the first half. He ended up with 12 points overall. He was really good in the first half. James Scott had a couple of buckets. But your go-to guys, Kason Pryor, Terrence Edwards, kind of struggling in the first half with turnovers, not really being able to see their shots fall. And then when the second half rolled around, it was a completely different ball game. And I think it was because Louisville's offense and the movement on and off ball threw Indiana into so much of a fit that nobody knew who they were guarding and who their assignments were, coming off of the screen, being able to set the secondary screen and being able to pull a guy to the rim. I mean, Javon Hadley, so many times he cut to the basket and was able to get some buckets. Same with James Scott, Kason Pryor as well. Terrence Edwards being able to hit a couple of big-time buckets. Rain Smith, obviously, James Scott. The list goes on. Noah Waterman had his best game as a Cardinal, 16 points. It's nice to see 4 of those three-pointers go in. Also felt like he banged it down low pretty well. The rebounds don't show it. He only had 3 rebounds, but I thought he performed really well. And Louisville did a really good job of rebounding. Yeah, they got out-rebounded 40-35, but it wasn't completely – blatant. Now, Indiana did have 22 offensive rebounds. That is something they basically doubled Louisville up. Like, Louisville does have to continue to work on that. Like, they have to be better in terms of limiting offensive rebounds. But the good news is that the on-ball defense was really good to the point to where they did a good job of sort of, mitigating some of that loss from the offensive rebound. So offensively, Louisville scored 89 points. They were up by 38 at one point, and then they called the dogs off, put the walk-ons in, and Indiana was able to get a little bit of the deficit cut. But Louisville shot the ball 57% from the field, 37% from the three-point line. They only shot 7 free throws, all of those coming in the second half. Felt like Indiana played pretty physical in the first half, and not many fouls were called. It is what it is. That's the game of basketball. But, Louisville has to, moving forward against West Virginia, they have to limit the turnovers. They turned the ball over 15 times, and they have to be able to get or limit offensive rebounds, I should say. But it feels like one of the main narratives is that, well, Indiana sucks. Indiana's offense was terrible. They just couldn't get anything going. So I'm thinking to myself, why was that? Let's have a conversation. Okay, Indiana's offense was terrible. Why? Why were they terrible? Well, the shots just weren't falling. Okay, why weren't the shots falling? Was it bad shot selection? Somewhat, yeah. But Louisville's defense is to be given the majority of credit for that. Now, yes, Indiana probably helped with some of their turnovers. Indiana turned the ball over 23 times. But how many times? Louisville had 15 steals. 15 steals of the 23 turnovers. So a lot of those weren't self-imposed. It was just Louisville being able to jump the passing lanes. One thing that I think they did really well is they neutralized Omar Ballo in the paint. He had 11 points. He was 5 of 8 from the field. He got most of his work in the first half. Pat Kelsey made some adjustments. When Ballo got the ball in the paint, they automatically collapsed. The help side defense came and they collapsed and just continually played, a game of chicken. Like, okay, I'm going to continue to, act like I'm collapsing. And then if you pass out, I'm going to rush out real quick and then just kind of repeat the cycle until the shot clock expires. Louisville did a really good job of denying the ball to Omar Ballo. And then when he got it, if he wasn't right around the basket, chances are he wasn't going to shoot it. Now, he did have a weird jump shot / floater that randomly went in, but I thought they did a really good job in terms of defending Omar Ballo. Malik Reneau led the way with 21 points. had some open shots, hit 5 free throws. He was the best Hoosier today. I was really impressed by Louisville's defense on McKenzie and Baco. I mean, he averaged about 19 points coming into this game on insane efficiency, and Louisville held him for 8 points, 2 of 7 from the field. Cannon Carlisle, Miles Rice, the starting backcourt for Indiana, 3 points total. A lot of that is contributed to how good Louisville played defense. And this was without Abubakar Traore and Corin Johnson. So it was nice to see Louisville's defense make life miserable for Indiana. So we talked about, well, Indiana's offense was terrible. Well, why was that? I'm looking at 3 reasons. Number one, how Louisville defended Omar Ballo completely changed Indiana's offense in the half court. Number 2, they switched everything. There really wasn't much. There wasn't many open looks for Indiana. When they did have open looks, usually they made them. But they switched everything. They communicated. And the third thing, you can't undersell this, is that Louisville played every possession on defense like it was the most important possession they'll ever play. That's the energy that Pat Kelsey's system promotes. And that's why you saw, yeah, sure. Is Indiana a little bit overrated? Probably. Did Indiana give Louisville any favors? Not really. How you can watch this game, and show me how many people didn't watch this game. You watch that game, it's hard to not give Louisville any credit. But like I said, the Cardinals have a chance to prove that they belong when they move on to the semifinals of the winner's bracket for the battle for Atlantis. Noon tip-off on Thanksgiving Day. They will play an old rivalry, an old Big East rivalry, Louisville squaring off with the West Virginia Mountaineers. We'll break down and preview that matchup when we come back on today's episode of Locked on Louisville. Cardinal fans, want to take this time to thank you all for making us your first listen of the day. Just a reminder that the Locked on Louisville podcast is free and available on all streaming services, covering your team every day. Thanks for tuning into this really late Wednesday evening edition of the show. I wanted to get this recorded and published as soon as possible because I am running up against time. Louisville plays less than 24 hours after they beat Indiana. They will take on West Virginia. West Virginia upset the third-ranked Gonzaga Bulldogs right after Louisville won. They defeated Gonzaga in overtime, 86-78. And in this matchup, I think it reiterates to me that Louisville and West Virginia should have a home and home every year. Like, I miss some of those Big East rival games. I'm glad that Louisville gets to play Pittsburgh, but I don't think it really is as significant as playing like Cincinnati and Memphis, even though they're not Big East. Memphis, Cincinnati, West Virginia. Like, I miss playing those teams every year. I think Louisville needs a home and home with West Virginia. West Virginia comes in to this matchup 4-1, just like the Louisville Cardinals. They pulled off a huge upset, got a key victory, the first key victory for Darian DeVries, head coach from Drake. There's a lot of similarities in this matchup between Louisville and West Virginia. First-year head coaches from the mid-majors that had a lot of success at their previous stops. Pat Kelsey at Charleston, Darian DeVries at Drake. Both of them having to utilize the portal to fill their respective rosters. They did, and they're looking to both be pretty solid. Now, West Virginia's only loss of the season was a blowout loss at Pittsburgh, 86-62, back on Friday, November 15th. The other 3 victories before the Gonzaga game, 2 blowout victories, one against Robert Morris, one against Iona. They barely beat UMass 75-69. It's basically, a pretty balanced team led by 2 really good veteran guys. Javon Small, transfer from Oklahoma State, 6'3" guard. He was, if you remember from our transfer portal talk in the offseason, Javon Small was at the top of my transfer portal wish list. Like, I think he is phenomenal, really good defender, can create his own shot, and he's been fantastic for the Mountaineers. He leads the team with 15.5 points, and he scored over 30 points. He scored over 20 points twice this season, 23 points twice this season, 23 against Iona, 31 against Gonzaga. Really good on-ball defender. This was his only game his first game of the season where he hasn't gotten multiple steals. So really good lead guard for Darian DeVries' team. And then Tucker DeVries, a transfer from Drake, 13.5 points per game, averaging 4.8 rebounds. Not the numbers from the field really haven't been good for him. 37% from the field, but he's shooting the ball really well from deep. 41% on 7 attempts per game is really, really good. So it's pretty obvious that those two are the ones that you have to focus on. They do have a freshman that's playing really well to start the season, Jonathan Powell, averaging 12 a game, 6'6" forward from Dayton, Ohio, playing really well. And then you have Amani Hansberry, 9.3 points per game, 7.5 rebounds. It's pretty interesting. Amani Hansberry, 6'8", 240 pounds. It's a very guard-based lineup for the West Virginia Mountaineers. So I think that bodes a little bit better for Louisville in terms of matchups versus, playing like Gonzaga. So this is more of a backcourt game for the Cardinals. I think it's going to be a tough matchup. I would rather have played West Virginia, obviously, than Gonzaga. I think Gonzaga's length, defense, and three-point shooting would possibly give Louisville fits. But I would have still been interested to see how Louisville fared against the Zags. But this West Virginia team might be a better matchup, but it's not going to be an easy game. West Virginia's on-ball defense is really good. They do, like Indiana, turn the ball over a little bit more than they should, averaging 13 turnovers per game. Pretty decent three-point shooting team at 37% when you have Javon Small shooting 44% from three. Tucker DeVries, 41%. Jonathan Powell, 41%. Your top three scorers are shooting really good from the three-point line. That's big time. The assist-to-turnover ratio, they're not really recording a ton of assists. The assist-to-turnover ratio is not really there. It's a lot of isolation ball with Small and DeVries. Both of them were really, really good against Gonzaga. For me, Louisville, I want to see the Cardinals just do a little bit more of what they did against Indiana. What I mean by that is just continue to move without the ball, continue to just make life miserable for opposing offenses and defenses. Louisville might have a size disadvantage, but what they do offer as an advantage and a benefit to their team is, that their big men can stretch the court. They can stretch the floor. They can knock down the deep ball. They can set those screens and move really well off of them. And just the movement that we saw was night and day better than we have at any point in this season. And that's really encouraging for this team moving forward. So the way I look at it, if you win this game, I think it just, once again, just sort of reiterates that Louisville is competing with these top teams. West Virginia, I think, is, you look at them at 4-1, and I think that they're better than, maybe the preseason had them in, sort of with the Louisville Cardinals. It's a very similar situation for both of these teams. It's just going to be a matter of going in and replicating and playing really, really well. Let's see if Louisville can make the final game, the championship game of the Battle for Atlantis, for the third time. They've only played it 3 times. This is their third time, but they finished second each and every time they played in the Bahamas. So if the Cardinals win, I haven't really decided. There is a football episode already recorded for Friday. There won't be an episode tomorrow unless Louisville wins. Then I might, if I'm not, hungover from the food coma that I'm in, I might record tomorrow night for a Thanksgiving Day episode, but we'll see. No promises. Everyone have a great Thanksgiving. Once again, I thank you all so much for making us your first listen of the day. Just a reminder, Locked On Louisville, free and available on all streaming services 5 days a week, your team every day. We'll see you right back here soon. Go Cards, and happy Thanksgiving.